Video games are pretty awesome. You know, speaking of video games, this is the first game that I've played completely handheld on Switch. I'm an all-console Switch player. Is that weird to you guys?
No. I usually played mine more console mode until I got the Switch Lite, and then I went entirely just handheld. Well, I keep the one in the dock forever, and then I keep the Switch Lite with me, but I made the Switch Lite my primary one. So, I mean, this is a good mobile Switch game for sure.
So I can't actually imagine playing it on Switch or console because, and maybe I'm just dumb. That's usually the answer, but I played it on Steam, and the primary, or I guess suggested way to play it is with mouse, right? So I was just clicking around. I couldn't even figure out how to get the controller to connect to work it.
All right, we should talk about that in the episode because I'm very curious to
Good
hear
point.
that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing with my Switch is that we have a bunch of drifting Joy-Cons in the house, so I was like having to find the one Joy-Con. So I had like a purple one on there and a black one, just so I could play the game. But yeah, I really enjoyed the game. What game are we talking about today, Steve? Why don't you kick it off? This is our first focused, like, we're going to review a game for the whole episode, Indiequest, because I think we've done like some reviews in the past, but we usually like front load it with like indie picks and all that. We figured, let's just sit down and we'll just deep dive into a game. So what's this game we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the 2011, I would call it an indie darling. I think it's pretty well known in the indie sphere, especially at that time. But the 2011 indie darling, To the Moon by Freebird Games, which was primarily, I don't know if I should say primarily developed, but had a significant portion of its development with a developer named Con Gao at the helm, and then with assistance by some other folks for some of the compositions, I think some of the artwork, and then later on for things like localization and stuff too. So very small team. But yeah, To the Moon, a game, before we get into kind of like a breakdown of what the game generally is about for those who aren't familiar with it, I'm actually curious for the two of you, what is your history, if any, with To the Moon? Because this is one that I played back in the 2011 when it came out. I was very, very excited about it when I heard like some buzz at the time, because it really did have like a pretty good sort of like network of people that were hyping it up. This was back when a lot of those like big hit indie games would like really sort of steal the show. Your Super Meat Boys and your Fezzes and stuff. There, it seems like there was always like one sweeping the attention of everyone, and I definitely remember this one having a pretty big wave behind it. But I loved it at the time. It's kind of, I did the thing where I played it the one time, never went back to it, and for a long time it has sort of always been one of my favorite games. Even as time has gone on and I sort of like filed that experience down to just the core details, I still remember really loving it. So it was really fun to revisit and see, where my memories of it were completely intact, where I had forgotten parts, what parts were better, or maybe even what parts were more clunky than I remembered. But it was a lot of fun. Josh, what about you? Did you have any experience with this game at all?
Listening to podcasts in 2011, I heard a lot about it. Just your standard fare back in the day, like One Upcast and Giant Bomb, they were all talking about it. And I bought it around that time period on Steam, and I kind of dabbled with it, but I never actually completed the game. And then it's like one of those holes in my backlog. Like, yeah, that was that first hour or 2 hours I played was like such a nice thing to experience 10 years ago, and I never beat it. But I bought it again on Switch this time, went through the entire game, and had a really good time. So
nice. What about you, Drachma?
I found out about To the Moon when you guys told me about it like 2 months ago after I beat Bear's Restaurant. You told me that I should try to play that game because it's similar. So that's how much I know about To the Moon. So the experience, I would say, of all of our To the Moon backgrounds is very, very different. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that we are bringing all those different perspectives, because I think we haven't really talked much about our experience with the game overall, because we wanted to save it for the recording, and I'm interested to see if you as a newcomer lines up with what I had back in 2011. So for anyone that is not aware of this game, To the Moon it's like I guess you'd call it a visual novel. It's sort of an adventure game, like maybe a point and click, but it's really primarily story driven with some real light interactivity. And it is a game developed in, what is it? Is it RPG Maker?
I think it's Game Maker Studio.
Maker, that's what it is. But it has the look of a Super Nintendo RPG. Like, it very much looks like one of those old 16-bit turn-based RPGs. And they actually riff on that a little bit in one section where they do like a faux turn-based battle. But so you're dealing with like little character sprites, tile-based grids, stuff like that. As you walk around and explore this world. It's a pretty contained world that you explore, but you do start going to other places as the game goes on. And the story follows kind of two sets of characters. In the, I guess what you'd call the present day, we have these characters named Dr. Rosaline and Dr. Watts, and they work for this agency called Sigmund Corp that basically exists to fulfill the wishes of people that are dying or on their deathbed. So people can pay money to this service, this company, and they come in and they essentially implant memories into you of something that you wish you had done or something that you wish had happened to you in your life. So you kind of die happy with that memory of what you never managed to accomplish or that thing that got away from you. And in this case, they are called in by a character named Johnny, who is on his deathbed, and his last dying wish was he wanted to go to the moon, thus the name of the game. And so it, in order to actually help characters to fulfill that wish, they do it by kind of doing like an Inception sort of thing. This game came out a year after Inception, so I don't know if there's any inspiration there, but they have these devices, and they will essentially jump into the character's existing memories, starting with the most recent ones, so starting when Johnny was in his elder years, and they will sort of hop between memories, progressively going younger and younger and younger, and the idea is that as they work their way through these memories, and they kind of do these links that we'll probably talk about a little bit more in the gameplay section, they are trying to get to some of the youngest memories that they can, so they can like plant the seed that would basically generate a new set of memories that would progress their life towards the thing that they want to do. So in this case, go back as far as you can to young Johnny's life, plant the seed. Hey, you want to go to the moon? You want to be an astronaut? You want to this is the life you want to live, the career you want to have, and then sort of reset those memories with that new context. And in theory, his memories would build a structure that would send him to the moon, or that would result in him becoming an astronaut. So the actual gameplay ends up being you hopping memory to memory to memory, key memories in his life that progressively get younger.
Yeah, and honestly, speaking of just the how you start at old Johnny and move backward through time, I thought that was super interesting based on anything I've ever played. Like, I feel like when like either like any form of media does this, whether it's a show or a movie or video games, it seems like you always hop all the way back and then go forward. And maybe that's just me or my experience with things. Mm-hmm. But it was just very interesting starting late and going back, because we'll get to some story stuff in a little bit, but it basically allowed us to guess, right? It's just kind of, we're guessing when he's an adult, and going back further and further, we're kind of like, well, this is the narrative I'm putting in my head of what I think might be going on. And then you go back one more stage further. It's like, well, I was definitely wrong in what I was thinking, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that was super interesting, the way they kind of intertwined, the way that they actually went back into into his memories. So
yeah, it's like a reverse linear story, I guess.
Yeah.
I like that idea too, because like you'll get introduced to like names of people, and they'll say a name, you're like, who's that? And then like you'll jump back 2 memories and you finally find out who that person was, that type of thing. I do think, are we talking just general overview how we're feeling about the game right now? I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the experience, and it's one of those things where I think that once the story is told, and everything is said and done, it's a very memorable thing that can be boiled down to like a few set pieces almost, or moments in the game that are just like stick out to me. And there's a lot of explaining in the story to get to those moments, but I think the payoff after you go through all the little journeys in each of Johnny's points of life is just makes the payoff at the end that much more rewarding. So yeah, it was just a small game kind of, but it had really big ideas, and I really thoroughly enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, it's worth mentioning, I don't know if we said this or not, but the game is not particularly long. It's like 4 hours or so to get through it. And that's if you're poking around and looking at things. There really isn't a lot of like side content. Every now and again, there's like a little optional event or something, maybe like a little mini scene or something that adds a couple of jokes, but you're not like hunting achievements. You're not doing any side quests or anything. It is a very contained, very considered story.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, it's just the pacing. The pacing is so good. I mean, you guys both kind of touched on it, but it doesn't take you out. Like, you don't have to go and do something like Steve just said about side quests or anything. You don't go do something for a half an hour and then have to kind of regain your thoughts on what was going on in the story. Like, it keeps you right there. Like, there's some small things, like you can play whack-a-mole at one point, right? But it's very, you're in the gameplay, or you're in the story, and it's intertwined into the gameplay basically the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that it's really well written too. Like, there's actually a lot of really good humor in this game. Like, I was actually chuckling to myself playing this, which doesn't happen too often. I'm not saying it's like a comedy game or anything, but I feel like the levity was there. It's such a somber like storyline. Like, we're helping this guy get his memory of going to the moon, right? That's the whole premise. And they put the little jokes and things in there to kind of like keep you not sad the entire game. And I think that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us to the characters, and I'm curious what you guys think. Let's start with the two main characters. So there's Dr. Rosalina and Dr. Watts. You mentioned that the game has a sense of humor. I feel like it's sort of played like, generally Dr. Rosalina is played as the more straight character, the more like
stoic.
More stoic. Let's get our job done. We're here to do a job. And Dr. Watts is more of the comic relief, and that's not universally true. You know, sometimes they switch roles and stuff like that. But in my experience, I feel like they do a pretty good job of adding like context and flavor into the story. They are pretty. All in all, they end up being pretty well rounded by the end, I think. I will say, just as my personal experience, at some point, the Dr. Watts, the comic relief, it was like every other sentence he was giving a punchline or a joke, and I was like, dude, you got to dial it back just a little bit. Like, you got to calm down. I can't handle this much sass per minute.
Hey.
He's got a mouth for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because Josh, I see your shirt is Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, right? And at one point, you probably didn't intend this, but at one point, Neil, I guess I refer to him there, yeah. Dr. Watts does a Kamehameha on the one memoir or the whatever they call the items that send you back in time.
Yeah. And she like interrupts him. It's like, you can't interrupt a Kamehameha. Come on. Yeah. But I actually kind of find Dr. Watts to be a jackass. Like, straight up. Like, I kind of hate you. It's a character you're supposed to hate because he just always has something negative to say. But he does, like you said, he becomes pretty well rounded by the end of it. There are moments where he isn't that jackass character, but a lot of the game he can be very extra.
So I personally felt, if we're just talking about those two main characters that you play as most of the time, we're talking about getting to the end of the game. I personally think that Dr. Watts has more, at least I'm not saying he necessarily grows as a character, but he definitely gets way more fleshed out than Dr. Rosaline does. I mean, she kind of sticks to, this is who I am the entire game. Mm-hmm. When we kind of learn, I mean, you guys know, right? Learn some things about his background a little bit. That maybe is we don't exactly know why he's constantly joking, but he definitely has some demons that he deals with. It seems like so.
Yeah, and this is a good spot to mention that this game came out in 2011. There are now 2 sequels that follow these characters, so they are sequels to the Moon. But just sort of inherently by the structure of the game, these 2 doctors going to someone on their deathbed to fulfill their last wish. The follow-ups in this series are them doing that same thing. So you're going to get essentially an entirely different story, an entirely self-contained story, but with this top layer of these 2 doctors sort of growing and changing over time. Or I assume, because one of my greatest shames is that I have played neither Finding Paradise or Imposter Factory, which are the 2 follow-ups to this. I don't know if either of you... I know for a fact that Drachma hasn't, and I'm guessing that you haven't either, Josh.
No, I started looking in. It's not on. Are they out on Switch? If they're not, I'm gonna have to just pop on the computer and play them probably, because that's how much I enjoyed this. I was like, I want more of this. So yeah.
When I saw To Be Continued at the end, I wasn't gonna look anything up prior to. I finished it this morning, right? But I wasn't gonna look anything up prior to coming and talking to you guys. But I didn't know if that actually ever happened. I know sometimes indie studios say they're going to do something and then never end up or don't have the funds or whatever. Which obviously To the Moon is super successful, so it would make sense that they would have had the funds to do it. But that's cool. I'll definitely check those out.
Yeah, and Josh, to answer your question, I believe so. There's To the Moon, and then there was like a sort of adjacent side story that it doesn't follow the same characters called A Bird Story, and then Finding Paradise, I think, is a sequel to the Moon, but also has some components from A Bird Story. Finding Paradise is on Switch, as far as I know. It's PC and Switch, and then Imposter Factory, which just came out not long ago in 2021, is I think at this point PC only, but I would be surprised if it doesn't come to Switch at some point, because these games they really are perfect for the Switch. They're perfect to play in handheld mode. They look like old cute RPGs. They're great. Basically any system where you can have a nice sound system or good headphones, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I was sitting there on the couch, Bluetooth headphones in, feet kicked up, had a drink, had some snacks, and I was just enjoying my time. It was good times.
Yeah, heck yeah. So we talked about those other 2 characters. We haven't actually really talked about the other 2 main characters very much. So those doctors are going into Johnny, who is the individual who has the wish to go to the moon. But a really important character in Johnny's life is his significant other, which is a woman named River. And as you go through the game, you learn a lot more about both of them. You learn about their relationship. You're going through key events in Johnny's life, right? So you're going to see everything from her passing to their marriage, and a lot of other things that we won't get into until we get into a more spoiler-focused discussion. But what did the 2 of you think of Johnny and River?
It was funny. It actually kind of blew me back a little bit, Steve, when you said our 2 main characters, the 2 doctors, right? I think this game, and I get that they're not silent protagonists, but they almost seem like catalysts for Johnny and River. Like they're there to keep the story going so that we can see the story of who we actually get. Do I care about Ava and Neil? Like, yeah, I mean, sure. I do. I want to see what happens to them, but I really want to see what happens to Johnny and River, right? Like, that's why I'm here. And it's, again, like, credits to the developers and, like, everybody who put time into this game. Like, that's something that you don't really see very often. Like, usually you play a main character and you want to see what happens to that main character. In this, like, you're just trying to see what happens to these other 2 that you never, ever get to walk around as, which is just very different from a lot of games I've played in the past. So I like both of them very much. I think their stories, especially like learning the things you do about them as you go back. I mean, especially River. Like, I know we're going to get to it later, but that's just so interesting. So
yeah, I agree. 100%. I think the idea of you kind of being like the ghost of Christmas future or Christmas past, kind of like floating at, you're literally like representative as like a 50% transparent sprite in these little worlds, because you're not like interacting with anything. So, I mean, you are interacting, quote unquote, but when you interact, you're just activating a portion of a memory. So doing that, it's like it's a very passive game, really. If you think about it, you just walk up to characters, you press a button, and then they start talking, and you just read dialogue boxes. But the way that it's written and the music, man, the music, we can talk about that. It's fantastic. Everything together just creates such a fantastic like storyline that even told, like we said, from the end to the beginning, you could piece it all together in your mind. And you're like, wow, that was something special. You got to see this entire person's life from basically almost inception to the end of their life. So it's just a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, because just the story, and we're not there yet, right? But just, this isn't going to be spoilery, but every time, and I guess another little piece to the game, I love that you can save this game whenever. Like, you can save it at all times. There's no save points. Just if you can get 10 minutes in, you're going to get something out of the game in those 10 minutes. But I love that as I was playing through this game, whenever I would shut it down for the night or the morning or whatever I was playing, I would go and kind of tell my wife about what was happening, because it was such a good story. You just want to talk to somebody about it. And they don't even have to know. I was just describing it, right? She's probably never going to play it, so I didn't have to worry about spoiling her. But it was just like, this is what's going on, and this is why it's interesting. And it's one of those games that's very thought-provoking, and you want to talk to somebody. So I'm glad we are all talking about it right now, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have since 2011 been trying to convince my partner to play this. Well, I say I've been trying to convince. It's not like she's been pushing back on me at all. It's just like we have a life full of a ton of incredible and fun things to do, and it's just hard to find the time sometimes, especially because before this game was on Switch, it was only on PC, and we generally have a harder time finding opportunities to play PC games because the PC's kind of tucked in the corner of the house. Usually you have headphones. It's not as easy to like watch someone play a PC game, and I wanted to be like a gargoyle sitting on her shoulder watching her play it. But this was a really good opportunity for me to say basically, hey, you take the controller, you can move the characters around, but we'll essentially just sort of be replaying it together. And I mean, I think this game actually kind of excels if you play it in that way, or even like you did, Drachma, just talking to your partner about it. It's a game very much about like partnerships and very much about connections between two people. And a lot of the themes kind of like touch on like insecurities that can come up in your life, or like just gaps that can exist in a relationship, either spoken or unspoken. And so it was actually really good to kind of like in real time be decompressing some of the story with her as we went through.
So you and Leah from beginning to end played this game?
Yeah.
This last time?
Yeah.
Oh man, that is awesome.
That's awesome.
I am jealous. That is sweet.
Yeah, we did it in 2 big nights. We played it like a week ago, and then it was, it's that classic thing where I know it's a short game, but it was like midnight going on 1 a.m, and we had to work the next day, and we're like, we probably have to stop. God.
Yep.
And then we went back.
But like I said with the saving, like it's nice that it's like, well, it's totally fine. Like if you need to make a little note about kind of what the characters are doing, then write it on a piece of paper. But being able to save anywhere, as long as you don't take 2 weeks off or something, right? You should be able to pick back up. So
yeah, exactly. In fact, I think the Switch version auto saves because I never even used a save, and as soon as you boot right back into the main menu, you like click start, and it just pulls up your save file. You're standing exactly where you were.
now that you say that, it
Yeah.
does autosave
Yeah.
on Steam too. But I'm one of those people that's like, nah, I don't trust it. I'm going to save. So,
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about the different versions of the game. The Switch version is ported by a different studio, and as far as I can tell, it plays just as similarly, except for the mouse pointer. You just use the thumbstick or D-pad to move around and use A to interact with things.
I'm jealous that you guys
Yeah.
played it that way, honestly. I could not figure I was like, this controller's just not working, and I didn't feel like getting into Steam and reconfiguring things, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll play with a mouse. This was how it was originally intended to play, I'm assuming, so here we go. But, I mean, it's you just point and click, right? I mean, you could have like a cursor, and you're just pointing on wherever you point in the world. I mean, I guess not wherever, right? There's very distinct paths that you can follow. But you just point in the world, and then you hover over things, and it gives you a magnifying glass. So I'm assuming you guys just walked up to things. Was there a cursor in your Switch
No. No, actually,
No.
now I'm curious
Nope.
because I've forgotten how this originally controlled. So you have a cursor. Can you hover over the everything in the environment on screen, and the icon will change when it is something you can
Yes.
investigate? Okay.
That was life-saving. Honestly, I would
All
have.
right.
Looking back, like now, it's like, oh, I really wouldn't want to do that because sometimes
So
I feel like the objects that you have to interact with were like super obscure, and I couldn't figure it out. And then eventually, I would just get in a point in the map or whatever you want to call it, the world, where I could just take my cursor and basically just imagine go like top to bottom and just like just swiping the screen all the way until I finally found a magnifying glass and like, oh, that's the thing I need to go click on. So I cannot imagine you guys just walking around clicking on everything to try to see what would work.
so does the Steam version have a journal?
Yes. No
Okay.
notes.
So in the journal, yeah, like the notes are in there, but for us, there's actually direction to say, hey, you might want to go down the hallway, or hey, you might want to go interact with this stuffed animal. Like it literally points you in the right
Really?
direction. I think that's the way. Yeah, you didn't even notice that, did you?
I didn't even see that at
Yeah.
all.
Maybe it says it
Yeah.
in Steam, but I didn't see it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you open up the journal, it'll say, hey, maybe take Dr. Watts on a walk down the road. And you're like, oh, okay. And you walk down the road and something happens. You're like, oh, okay, that works. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Tip to everyone out there. I had no idea that was the case. We're talking about the controls here. We should give some context to this by how the actual gameplay works. So it's not entirely a visual novel. There is some interactivity. The main structure is you spend most of the time in the game in these different memories, and the memories are sort of self-contained. Like they have this like sort of like fuzzy outline all around the borders of like the house or the room or the neighborhood, wherever you are. So you can't just like wander wherever. It's sort of whatever was relevant to that memory is the place that you can explore. And in order for these characters to continue to dive deeper and deeper into memories of Johnny, they need to jump from linked points. Basically, they have to jump from something that exists in two memories to get from one to the other. And in order to do that, I'm not really sure why this is the case. I think they sort of just like make up a conceit to make it a little more gamey, but they have to explore the environment that they're in, which is pretty small, usually only a couple of rooms, and interact with 5 different objects that give them sort of this like meter that builds at the top of the screen. And then they find that object that links to memories, and they use that power, those like 5 charges of that meter, to break a barrier on that object that lets them jump into the previous memory. So like a really good example would be like maybe there's a backpack sitting on the ground in a bedroom because this is like after school, and then you'd explore and you'd click on this book, go talk to the mom, go interact with this clock, whatever it might be, interact with 5 other objects in the environment, usually getting some other story at the same time, or a little bit of like filling in of the particular memory in the particular scene. And then you jump into that backpack and you go to a previous memory. Maybe now you're in school. But when you do that jump, there's one other mechanic as well that I will touch on in a sec. But the reason I wanted to cover that like 5 meters is it can turn into kind of a pixel hunt if you don't either have a mouse cursor like Drachma did, or I guess if you don't know that there's hints in the journal, which I did not, because Leah and I definitely had a couple of instances where we would have like 4 of the memories, and we would just basically be like skimming the border of every room, clicking on everything, trying to be like, all right, what are we missing? What is the one last object that we need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very
so
thankful that I had what I had, because I was thinking that I was like, man, I guess I'm glad I'm not playing on a controller, because I don't know how I would know that this random brown 4 pixel wide thing over here is something I was supposed to click on. Like,
Yeah. So if you guys would have known about the journal, you'd have been like, oh, okay. That's what I started doing. It's like when I was lost, I'd be like, all right, open the journal. Oh, maybe you should go click on the platypus again. Oh, okay. And I'll go click on the platypus.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as with most structures like this, I'd say 99% of the time it does not get in the way. You didn't really notice it or think about it. It only really becomes noticeable in the couple of instances where you don't know what to click on. And there's actually one, most of the environments are very small, so it really doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal. There was one at the tail end of the game that I can't really speak to until we're in spoiler sections, where you're in a pretty big environment with multiple floors, and that is one where we missed one
Yeah.
thing, and we had to do a little bit of like wandering. But I don't know that there's much to say on this, but I'm just curious what you guys think. So when you do this memory hop, when you charge the barrier, you do your Kamehameha and you break the barrier on this object to jump into a previous memory. You do like a tile flipping mini game before you go into the next memory. I mean, what thoughts?
I thought it was interesting. I mean, I actually put in my notes like puzzles are interesting. Like they were fine. And honestly, it made me think of you, Steve, because I was like doing these little puzzles, and it reminded me of watching you play Mole Mania. Just because it's like if someone was watching me do this, because it tells you in the hopefully it tells you guys on your Switch, right? It tells you your ideal moves.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I did not get that ideal number, I was like, God, I'm an idiot. I'm just a moron. So,
Yeah, it's a simple mini game. Maybe it's just to break up the monotony or make you feel like you're like a hacker mode. Is this like during like the BioShock time where you did like the little pipe puzzles and stuff? Is it during the same time frame as that? Because that's kind of what it reminded me of. But yeah, it was nice. I mean, it broke up the gameplay a little bit.
Yeah, and they really are not too taxing. Like they tell you the recommended number of moves, like Drachma said, and it's usually you can solve the puzzle in like 3-4 moves. I think that we solved all of them in the required or the minimum number of moves, except for one that we like made one wrong move on and ended up getting like it took us like 70 moves to get it because we just started clicking around. But yeah, while not really intrusive, it jumped out at me because I was like, I had no memory of this game. I am constantly singing this game's praises, but when I talk about like a decade of like just nostalgia and memories of this game, this part had completely fallen out of the back of my head. When that booted up, I was like, what there's a tile flipping mini game here that we're going to do 10 times over the course of the game.
I will say one frustrating thing, and you guys can tell me if they clean this up, because you guys both played the Switch version this last time, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you do the tile flipping, it has the item, the thing that's going to transport you between memories in the background, right? Does it still for you guys too? Mm-hmm. Like a picture of it?
Yeah.
Like behind the tile?
Yeah.
So there were a few items where they were white. And so I like couldn't tell where the tiles were, or maybe my eyes just suck. But I was just like, I can't, like, we'll get to this, but there's a rabbit at one point that's the item, and I'm like, I can't, where are the like white tiles? And like, so I just had to start flipping to see where they actually were in relation, because it just hit them. It was like they were camouflaged. So I thought maybe that they spruced that up on the Switch version so you could actually see them better. But yeah, that was my one complaint with it.
They might have, because I didn't have any issues. I was like, there's a black square and then there is a picture square, and you just flip. So I don't think there was ever an issue.
So the item's not right behind. There was one. It was off to the side. Because my tile game is like on top. It's like on top. It's hard to like explain in audio, I guess. But the tile game is on top of the item. It's a big blown up picture of it, and it's just the tile game just falls right on top of it. So I couldn't see sometimes what the tiles look like.
That was the case in the version I played, but the object was translucent, and they might have changed the contrast, because I don't think that the white would have ever been an issue. I think that the background was darker.
Yeah,
maybe that was feedback.
Yeah, I would. It's probably the case, because like I never had that issue at all. So that's good that the console version doesn't do that. So
it was very small. Whatever. It took me an extra 2 turns to figure it out. It wasn't that big of a deal. But.
Yeah, and there's no loose state with those either. Like you can do the maximum and it'd be okay. Yep. So,
yeah. They do. You mentioned the small, like the little details. I will say, we didn't really like touch on too much what this game looks like, other than it's made in Game Maker. It looks like a 16-bit RPG. It looks like. I would say a spruced up version of a 16-bit RPG. Like it looks more like what a 16-bit RPG looked like in your memory, because they do a lot of good things with like lighting coming in through windows and shadows and stuff like that. But really surprised me in replaying this that I didn't remember is all the little details that you'd think would be lost in a game using that style. In particular, a lot of the character moments, like you can really tell when a character, like the emotion that a character is going through based on their animation, and it's just like, a small animation in the sprite, and like just the way that the text boxes or the camera pans or like little pauses end up like it's like, I guess what I'm saying is it's directed very well. Like they do a good job. It's not just like a string of text boxes constantly. They do have little moments that break up a beat of a line to make it more impactful, stuff like that.
Yeah, they do little emoticons too. Like they'll have like someone's like deep in thought, they'll have like a little thought bubble. If they have like somebody winking, there'll be like a little winking face. So it's just that adds to it too, just a little more flair to the animation. I particularly, there's a couple moments where they kind of like have where the characters are kind of sitting there and just enjoying the view, and it was generally like pretty like nice game. Like I liked the way it looked, and then when it got to those moments, I was like, actually took my breath away a little bit. I was like, damn, this is just gorgeous. The game I can think of that has like similar, I mean, I think it's made in the game maker studio, or at least the prototype is Stardew Valley. Like I had some comparisons in my head from that, because like the lighting does similar things. Like it's like pixelated, but that's a good point of reference if people want to see what this game looks like. It's, if you played Stardew, you're gonna get something that has similar like look to it, somewhat. That nice 8-bit, 16-bit top-down look.
Yeah, I love that you guys kind of hit the nail on the head, but that they were doing so much more with less, I guess. Like the two main things I can think of that were like, oh, that's just so awesome, and it's so little. Like it's not much, but River specifically, when she's thinking, sometimes will turn her eyes a little bit, like she will avert her stare. Right?
Yeah, like she's like gazing off to the side, which is, I don't know that this is intended, but that results in her basically like looking over at you, the player character. In a lot of cases, it's like you can sense the discomfort or like the processing.
Yeah. You can just tell that there was awkwardness for her, so she's just like turning her head, like she's embarrassed or whatever, and doesn't want to deal with the situation she's in. I mean, it's literally they moved the eye pixel one pixel over. It's just so basic, but it's so good. And honestly, reminded me of, I'm not sure, I'm assuming Steve, you've played this. I can't remember if you've played it or not, Josh, but Final Fantasy Tactics, although that's a 32-bit game, but just the sprites are so small, but they were able to put so much emotion in their faces, and this kind of reminded me of that. So, then the other thing was sometimes when the characters are excited, they close their eyes in such a way and turn them up a little bit, and it's like you can just tell that they're happy. It's so good. I don't know.
Yeah, really, really. Tactics is a good pull actually, because Tactics being a 32-bit game is sort of in that same wheelhouse of what you remember a 16-bit RPG actually looking like, or what you remember it looking like versus what it actually looked like, because
what your brain thinks it looks like.
Yeah. And it's the exact same in this game. Like it's very, very expressive in a way that like I think true like a Final Fantasy IV or something couldn't quite do back in the day. So they do a good job.
So, do you guys want to talk about music? Is that where we are? You guys want to talk about some music?
Yeah, I do. I will say, it's an interesting game to talk about because, as we've said many times, it's essentially just a short story. And without speaking to the details of the story, there's a lot of things around the edges we can fill in. But if you just want to get a sense for the tone of this game, if you just want to like, what's the vibe? Maybe look up like a screenshot or two to see the art style we're talking about, but really just go listen to the soundtrack. Go pull it up on YouTube, or I'm sure it's on Spotify, and give it a listen, and you'll know like the exact range of emotion that you're gonna hit when you play this one, because it's very sweet, it's very somber at times, it's very sad some other times. Like it is, it really runs the range, and it has for a decade been like a good background soundtrack that I've been listening to for a long time. It's so much that like the music is like ingrained in my head at this point. I can't really separate my memories of the game from the soundtrack itself. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely. I do think the soundtrack is a key component. It, I could see it's peaceful. All the music, even when you're supposed to like have like a more tense moment in the game, the music still has that like underlying feeling of peacefulness to it. And then when it's sad, it still has that like calming resonance to it. I don't know. The it's very thoughtful, like all the soundtrack is, and of course the main theme that you hear throughout the entire game from the beginning to the very end. There's various versions of it that you hear, and just having that theme that you keep coming back to definitely resonates with me, and it's kind of stuck in my head ever since I played it. And yeah, I just think it's one of those soundtracks that's one of a kind, and this game wouldn't be this game without it, pretty much. I can't, like you said, you can't separate the two, because having those big pivotal moments without that theme in the background, it wouldn't have hit as hard as it does.
You touched on it, exactly what I was thinking, Josh. Like, I've said it in the past where I think a soundtrack can make the gameplay better and vice versa, right? Like, depending on what the track choice is, it can make the player feel something. I don't know if I've ever played a game that's more true than To the Moon, because there are some themes that are like super haunting, like very, very melancholy, right, or whatever. And it's just like, as soon as it starts playing, the game hasn't even told you what's about to be coming, right? It hasn't shown you that yet, but as soon as it starts playing, you're like, oh my god, like you just get mentally prepared for something that's going to break your heart a little bit or something, right? So it does such a good job at basically interjecting and combining with what the game is doing to tell the story.
Yeah. I mean, and the game knows that too. This is one of the first games I can remember that gives you a warning right up front that says, hey, this game is best enjoyed with headphones. You should definitely not have distractions, sit down and listen. And I mean, so much so that the music is like directly tied into the story. Like, the main theme that you hear in the fiction of the game is composed by Johnny for River. He's basically written a song for her, and that is the theme that sort of like crops up in different ways and in different compositions and things, and ends up taking on sort of new life as the game goes on. I forget, there's a quote that I wish I had looked up along the lines of, I don't know if it was like Spielberg talking about a John Williams score or something, but there was a director, a very famous director at some point, that said something to the effect of like the story and the shots that we give can tell the audience when they whether or not that this is a sad scene, but it's the score by like John Williams or whoever that is actually going to make you cry. Like the composition is responsible for actually delivering the emotion that the rest of the movie is setting up, and that is 100% true in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever For River, which is the main theme, starts playing, it's like, oh, I mean, it's like the perfect callback. You know that something emotional is coming, something that you need to really pay attention to. It does such a great job. Like, I don't know. Of any game, like I said, of any game I've ever played, the music is so pivotal in this one. That's why I think that people should go listen to it for sure. Like, I think it's a really good soundtrack by itself, but it's so good. It's so worth playing the game so you can hear it in action, for lack of a better word, right? So you can see exactly why it works with what they're doing.
Yeah, very much so. And I should say that the composition is done by, primarily I think done by Kan Gao, the director of the game, but it's also done by someone by the name of, I think, Laura Shigihara. So they work together. And I'm not sure who did what components, or if like one of them was writing the music, the other was performing it, but it is the two of them together that have crafted the treat that is this game's soundtrack.
Fantastic. Now, I think that we said pretty much all we can say about this game without spoilers. What don't you guys think?
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's probably true. So the way that we'll do this is we'll give you a little bit of a wrap up, spoiler free thoughts from each of us, which I think is essentially going to amount to we all say you should go play this, but we'll give you our closing arguments, if you will. We'll do a little bit of plugs, and then for anyone who has played the game or wants to stick around for the spoiler section, we will do that after we give our plugs, to give folks plenty of time to turn off the podcast, go play the game, and then you can come back and listen to our reactions to the story itself once you have. And I will say, as far as my closing thoughts, I highly recommend it. I would really encourage everyone to go check this out. It's not long. Do not listen to the spoiler section without, because you are essentially taking away the impact of the game. It really is less if you know what's coming. Not that the game it hinges entirely on a twist, but I think especially your emotional response to the events in the game are heightened by not knowing what's coming. So, I mean, I've been a pretty big proponent for this game for a long time. When I did my favorite games of the decade, it was on my top 10. And even though going back, some of the mechanics were a little clunkier than I remembered, maybe that would push it down out of that top 10 spot. But I mean, it would still be very much in the running, which for a decade of games is really saying something. So when we first started this show, honestly, To the Moon was one of the first games I thought of, and we've for a long time not brought it to the quest log because we knew that we'd want to do a bigger episode like this on it exclusively, which sort of tells you everything you need to know. So yeah, highly recommend it, and check it out.
I completely agree with everything Steve said. I honestly don't have a whole lot to add outside of that, other than, as I've kind of stated in the past, and honestly, I'm so happy I did play Bear's Restaurant, or else Steve might not have ever mentioned this to me, and maybe I wouldn't have played it. But it is way outside the typical Drachma scope. So I'm telling you, if I can get as much out of this game as I did, anybody can, and it is so good. And yeah, the mechanic, or the kind of the gameplay part and moving around the world, can feel a little clunky, even with a mouse. There were certain points where I was like, why am I not moving in the right direction? Or my characters are floating along at certain points. But the story just prevails and just destroys it. I finished the game, and without doing a very critical look at the game, don't even think about the game or the actual clunkiness of it. It's just
exactly like I said. My memory of this game had completely forgotten all those pieces. You notice the really light friction in the moment, but it truly is not a hindrance and should not be a barrier to anyone playing this.
Yeah. What did you think, Josh?
I think this is main quest with a bullet, obviously. But it's to me, it's going to be a classic indie title for me because of the storyline and the characterization, and sharing this podcast with you guys to be honest. That's going to be a good memory to include with in this game. But I think that it's just ultimately a fantastic package that I think that you are definitely missing out on something special if you haven't played it. 3 to 4 hours is not much time, and I want to ask you guys one thing before we get out of here too. Obviously, you guys know we're all saying go play this game right now before you listen to the spoiler stuff. Did you guys cry at the end?
100%, yes.
Yep. Honestly, I didn't think I was going to. I made it the entire game. Choked up a little bit, oh, this is super touching. But the very end, which we'll talk about, oh yeah, that gets you. That gets you good.
Yeah, it's a good kick in the pants a little bit there at the end. Got some tears, and my partner's sitting next to me. Are you crying? Maybe. I'm not. I promise. That moment. But yeah, if you want something with that much emotion packed into it, definitely bring the tissues, but sit down and play this game, and come and listen to the spoilers after the fact here, and have that conversation with your podcast buddies about all these awesome moments of the game.
Heck yeah. Well, hey, that's a perfect opportunity for me to ask, Josh, where can they find you on the internet?
Oh yeah, they can find me at Frantic Society on Twitter, and I post all the things I'm up to over there. How about you, Steve?
I'm Blink on Twitch and Twitter, and you can come follow me on either of those places. I'm either talking about or playing indie games or retro games or something, so come say hi.
And I am at Captain Drachma on Twitter. And of course, all three of us are in the Polykill Discord if you want to come and hang out. Greatest place on the internet.
Darn right.
And that's part of the Polymedia Network. We can talk about the podcasts that are involved there too. You can find all of our awesome stuff at polymedianetwork.com. But now, what I've been waiting for the most for this game is we're going to go ahead and play the outro music, and then after the outro music, we're going to jump into some spicy spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled, go play the game and come back and listen to the spoilers.
Their show, which is your podcast all about beating video games. So we talk about what Trav and I are beating, we talk about what the community is beating, and we make it fun. What about you, Drachma?
Oh, there is Drunk Friend, basically a podcast where Alex Nest Drunk and Trav Nest Friend, who is also a co-host on the Polykill Discord, or just Polykill Podcast, interview other creators and people who are just affiliated with the video game industry. They recently had Dak Croach on, who is the communications director for MagFest, and it was super interesting to listen to some of the stuff that went into that, especially since last year was my first MagFest. Just to hear about how it gets put together was awesome.
And last but not least is Tales of the Lesser Medium, where they take some of those interesting and weird game stories and make them hilarious and digestible in podcast format. And that's Caleb J. Ross and Trav. And you can find all of our awesome stuff at polymedianetwork.com. But now, what I've been waiting for the most for this game is we're going to go ahead and play the outro music, and then after the outro music, we're going to jump into some spicy spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled, go play the game and come back and listen to the spoilers. Just start it off, Seth. You can.
All right, so I'm going completely off the cuff. This is just three bros talking about a game right now. If everybody tuned into this part, it's just like we're hanging out talking about this game we just played.
Yep.
Love Indiequest, but I just sometimes that's the best way to just talk about stories and games. It's just like, what you guys think of this thing though? I mean, this game is super dark at certain points. I mean, real dark. I mean, the biggest thing, okay, I mean, we're going to get into some deeper spoilers on this, but and this is why I said about Neil being well-rounded, Dr. Watts, right? Mm-hmm. The painkiller thing. I was just like, oh my, we're really going there. Holy crap.
It was interesting because, so this game has like a made famous by Marvel post-credits stinger that shows him like taking painkillers, and it just ends on that. Like there's no other context. But there's a scene slightly earlier that you're playing as Ava, and you're like going and you're grabbing something out of the car, and at that time, like painkillers fall out of the side of the car door onto the ground, and you can't interact with them. Like it's very. They try to make it pretty subtle, but Leah and I were going through and we were trying to click on it. Like, what is this? Like, what is this little 2-pixel object that just fell out of the car? I don't even know. And at the same time that's happening, Neil is like being really cagey in the house. And he's like, I gotta run out. I'll be right back. Don't worry about it. So you know something's going on. And it's not until after the credits that you realize, oh snap. He's
in the Steam version, you can interact with them.
Oh, really?
So yeah.
Oh, wow.
I clicked on them, and Ava's like, what painkillers? Are these Neil's? Basically, or something along those lines, and then pockets them. So right before she gets into the car and that falls out,
Whoa.
I mean, you were talking about the caginess, but it's like, and we've all done this, right?
Yeah.
Where even from the basic, I have 2 10-year-olds, right? So we hide presents in a certain place of the house that I don't want the kids to go find. So sometimes, and it's usually in the basement. So if I tell my son, hey, run down and grab something from the basement, and he runs down there, and then right afterwards I'm like, oh, uh-oh, he's gonna see where the presents are. So then I run down there after him, like, hey, wait, actually I forgot, it's actually upstairs, or I needed you to go do this, or just what, just to get him to stop. And that is exactly what happened to Neil, because he's like, yeah, Ava, you go get it, I don't feel like doing it right now, or whatever, because that's Neil's persona. And then right afterwards he's like, she's gonna notice or see the thing that I don't want her to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in the Steam version, Ava just picks up the bottle and then comments on it, walks back, or basically runs into Neil as he's walking outside, and says, Neil, are these yours? And he's like, oh, I didn't want to tell you about it. Does he do the whole I ran into a concrete wall thing for you guys?
No. This must be like a
I don't remember that.
Scene. Either we missed it by not interacting with it when we could have, but we really tried. Like, I was like circling this object, just like Leah was mashing the button. So I feel like that might be a scene that they added entirely new.
Yeah, I mean, you pick it up, you run into Neil, and she's like, are these yours? And Neil says, I didn't want to bother you with it, but yeah, I smacked into a concrete wall and hurt my head. And Ava's like, these are really strong painkillers. And then Neil, in his typical comical self, says, well, it was a really strong wall. And I was like, okay.
No, maybe they added, like, so maybe they ported this game, and then as they're making Finding Paradise, that's like a theme for him, like, later on. So they, like, added that line in later after the fact. That's all I could think of.
It could be. I mean, it was pretty subtle, and it was like, whatever. And Ava, you could tell she's like, this is something I have to deal with, but I don't have time to right now.
Yeah.
And then they moved on. So,
yeah. In fact, in the Steam version, I didn't even know necessarily that they were painkillers. Like, there is the scene after the credits where he's like walking down away from the lighthouse, and he like gets like a little like boom, 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 like a beet red, like a headache or something, and he takes them. But without the context of that scene, I was like, okay, are these painkillers? He's constantly like diving into people's memories. Is there something else happening with him where like this experience of always being inside other people's memories is starting to like mess with his head, and he's taking some other drugs for that? I had no idea.
Yep. Yeah, that was the thing. Darkness, right? The darkness of the game. That was kind of a subtle thing that doesn't really affect most of the game, right? But that was the way. And that's why it's funny. You guys say, well, Neil, I guess he kind of grows. That was the thing that was like, whoa, Neil has a lot of stuff that he's dealing with that we don't think about because he's always joking, which I think is it's a lot of mental health. That's what this game's kind of all about, or it's very much about. You're literally jumping into somebody's brain. So to have Neil have struggles, and we all know people who are constantly joking, always about having a good time, but a lot of those people are the people who suffer from that stuff the most, that we just don't know about.
Yeah, there's a definite theme of mental health in this. Like, there's two characters that are on the spectrum. They have autism, so it's like River and Isabel both, and one of them is more functioning than the other one, obviously, and she even makes a comment about it. But that is definitely one of those things that, I wasn't sure what they keep saying her affliction, people like her, and things like that, and I'm like, okay, does she have autism? What's wrong with her? And then, you kind of like figure that out throughout the story, but it's like, yeah, mental health is definitely a theme. Like you said, we're going in people's brains, so.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just like you said, it's not just like just one, like, oh, they tacked that onto her character. Like, it's sort of is directly relevant to the story. Like, some of the memories you're literally in like the memory of her in the doctor's office when she's being diagnosed, and they're talking about like the complications that are arising from this being diagnosed later in life. So you haven't had the opportunity to develop sort of coping mechanisms. They actually have, I think, it's Isabel has a really good discussion where she's talking about like she was diagnosed early, so she was able to sort of like build up a lot of the social norms that she knew she needed, but then that has like created this whole other complication in her mind where she now knows how she needs to act to be socially normal in different situations, but like that is also it is just an act. She is not like that is not her like true genuine self or genuine interaction, but she's been doing it for so long that she kind of like forgets what she would really even act like anymore, because she just sort of does what she needs to do. And I was like, wow, that was well described, because even not experiencing anything on the ASD spectrum or anything like that, like you can get that even in just like a work environment and stuff, where you like switch into work mode so much and you end up like kind of becoming a different version of yourself, and you start to like forget what kind of joke would I have actually made here. So I thought it was pretty pretty well described.
I think
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead,
just,
Josh.
sorry, I was going to say it's the same thing with this podcasting. You put on Steve on a podcast is different than Steve hanging out with Leah, at home. So yeah,
that's I mean, that was you kind of hit it, Steve. But Isabel's choices in life, it's almost like conformity to the extreme. Like she has basically changed herself for everyone else, because she knows that it's not acceptable, or she's been told that maybe it's not acceptable for her to act a different way, or she won't be accepted if she doesn't. So she has to put on a face. And she's an actress, which was, so she's basically trained to be an actress, and she just uses that training in everyday life, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Rough.
yeah.
So like, there's something that I want to mention, but I know how to do it without necessarily having to describe a bunch of context. So, the reason that I think, one, this game was in 2011. I think it actually is handled pretty respectfully and pretty responsibly, considering the time that it came out. But they also, I think, a little bit play on our expectations of River as someone with what in the game they describe as Asperger's. Because a big, like, sort of, I guess, like, reveal or something that is, like, core to the story is that Johnny has forgotten the first time that he originally met River. Like, they met in the past. He's forgotten that because he's basically had those memories erased. And then he explains to River, he goes to River in, like, a pretty honest moment, and he says, hey, when I first met you, to his perception of first meeting her, he says, the reason I approached you is because you were different and I wanted someone that would just make me not have a normal life. Like, obviously that isn't the only reason, and obviously our history together is still meaningful and I still care about you, but, like, this is the truth. I just wanted you to know. And she has, like, kind of an odd reaction, like a little bit cold maybe. And I think that the game is trying to sort of lean on, like, well, yeah, she does have all the, like, social norms and social grace that someone in this position might, but I think the reality is that it's part that, and then it's also part that whether she is actively remembering it or subconsciously remembering it, I don't really know, that she knows that isn't true, but also feels like she can't, like, tell him that because it's, like, not her place to remind him of those memories that he's forgotten. So I appreciated that they gave her that depth and didn't just lean on her condition exclusively as, like, this is her one character trait.
Right. Actually, really quickly, you said that in both of your versions it says that she has Asperger's. That's accurate.
In the journal it says Asperger's.
Oh.
Yeah, in the journal it does, yeah.
Oh, what does it say in speech? Did they just talk about what pervasive dissociative disorder or something like that? Is that what the doctor says? PDD? Because that's how it's described in the Steam version. I wonder if they updated that because Asperger's is now lumped into autism. Like, they don't call it Asperger's anymore.
Yeah, they basically said that this isn't. We don't need to call this out as separately as, like, a different, like, higher classification of autism, which is why I say, like, this game is made in 2011 with all of the understanding of that condition that existed at the time. But at least in the Switch version that I played, they still, in the journal, still called it Asperger's.
I might not have seen that journal entry. I love that that we're in super spoiler territory, right? The entire game, or at least from the beginning, when she's older, and then throughout time, and especially after Johnny says that to her about, well, this is why I'm with you, or this was the main reason I decided to be with you. It isn't anymore, but I just want to let you know. And you think that kind of changes her a little bit, right? Like she has autism, but also it almost like makes her go a little, she kind of like loses it a little bit because of the rabbits and stuff like that. Like, of course, a person with autism is going to focus on one thing, but you think like something like that was not good for her to hear that from him. But now, having played the entire game and understanding where they come from, I don't know if River ever knew necessarily what happened to Johnny when he was young. And so with the rabbits, she was always trying to remind him, and he just couldn't remember. And I think she was just like, but remember though, what does it mean to you? Like, what is this? And I want you to describe the moon. And Johnny would never do it I think she was just like, and then her inability to just have that social and have that conversation with him, she'd just be like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not going to continue on. Like, you obviously don't know what I'm talking about, but it's because those memories were literally erased. He couldn't remember going to look at the moon and the stars with her anymore because it was just gone because of what happened, because of the drugs that he was on when he was a kid. So that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game intentionally leaves that vague. I don't know. I don't have a firm interpretation of this. I think I lean towards what you're saying. And for context for anyone, for spoiler context, so Johnny at some point in his childhood was given beta blockers. Essentially, he was given like memory drugs that erased his memories of the time and before when he took them, which includes when he first met River at this carnival. So he met River for the first time ever, and they sort of sat on this log and they looked at the stars, and she says like, oh, okay, what do you see in the stars? And they find a rabbit constellation that has the moon as the rabbit's belly. And that's like kind of their first connection, their first moment together is finding this rabbit. And so then later Johnny has a crush on her or whatever. He reintroduces herself, and they never really explicitly say what both of these characters know, especially what River knows, because when she gets told like his reason for first approaching her, she does start making all those origami rabbits to remind him, but you don't know, does she explicitly remember that moment sitting there and she's actively trying to refresh his memory by making all these rabbits? Does she only like, because she was young, only have like a partial memory of it maybe? And if she does actively remember that, is she not telling him when they first met because she can't, or because she doesn't feel like that's appropriate? Or does she actually like know about like, it's very reasonable that she would know about the passing of his brother, like they went to school together and stuff. And is she just, you can read it as, I can't really tell him how we first met without that opening up the can of worms that is these memories that he's forgotten, including his brother that it was lost. So it's like, is it really my place to remind him of his brother that he's forgotten? I don't think so. So she just kind of has to like sit in that discomfort, and her making all those rabbits is kind of her, I think, like in that middle ground, like trying to spark a memory without actively doing it. In a way.
That's true.
Yeah, and she's kind of coping at the same time by doing something repetitive like that. What did you guys think about like that reveal of it being his twin brother? Like, I did not see that coming at all. I was like, wait, so he died? How does this make any sense? And then, of course, because it's the same exact sprite, and when you're in that time frame, like that was like the whole, like once you get past the beta blockers with the roadkill, which was an interesting thing, that I thought that was a smart way to do that. But when you go back in time and you see his brother get killed, and then like that was so heart-wrenching to me, thinking about somebody that you just never got to see his brother with him his entire life. Basically changed his entire viewpoint on everything, which we saw when the doctor changed it back, which was a nice moment too. So I don't know. I just thought that was a really, that was the first time I like started getting teary-eyed, was when his brother passed away there. And I was like, I got
to give it up to Leah, because there's a moment where they say, where I think Ava says, like, did you notice anything odd about the bedroom? Like, it's like maybe 10 minutes before the actual reveal. She's trying to suggest to Neil, like, did you notice something was weird? And I, even playing it the second time, I didn't notice that detail, even though I knew the story event that was coming. But Leah instantly was like, yeah, I did. There was bunk beds in that room, and blah, 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 blah. And she listed like 2 or 3 things.
Damn.
Like, you are, what a galaxy brain you are. Like,
So observant.
Seriously. That's awesome. Especially when you know it's coming and you're like, wow, you got it. You figured it out. And like
she said not only the bunk beds, she's like, yeah, bunk beds. And she's like, also, roadkill has been a recurring theme in this game. And I was like, God, well, look at you. Freaking media literacy out the wazoo. So they do a good job, you know, I guess, for people that are more observant maybe than the 3 of us. They do a good job of signposting that and giving you the information out ahead of time. They foreshadow it well.
I think that scene specifically, I love how, well, it's hard to say love, but the developers did a really good job of, even in the moment, because when we're in these dreams, right, I don't know about you guys, but I got kind of caught up in it, or not dreams, I guess memories, right, but I got kind of caught up in it, and it's like, yeah, I'm just playing through like these levels to get further back. It's a game, right? So that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I understand that they're Johnny's memories, but for the most part, I'm trying to find things, kind of uncover some stuff about his memories, and then move on. But it made so much sense when Neil said, why are we still here? Like, he should be at least unconscious. Like, we shouldn't be able to see this right now. And then I was like, as soon as he says that, I'm like, because I just figured he got hit by the car, and that was traumatizing for him. For a little kid, getting hit by a car would be traumatizing, right? If you survived. So it's like, yeah, why are we still? Why can we still see this? And then Johnny comes running up the side of the screen, and it's like, poof, you know? Like, that was just the mind-blown moment where it's just like, oh, okay. That makes so much more sense, which kind of put the rest of the memories in perspective a little bit more, because it's like, well, I still want to know, like, what is River doing up there? You know, I want to go see what she's doing. And you try to talk to her, nothing happens, and like there's nothing going on. It's because that's not part of Johnny's memory anymore. Like you've moved past that, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I love how they integrated that in, kind of called that out. Like, man, I can't believe he survived that. Like, that was quite an accident there, and like, oh, he didn't.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
You know, the main central theme of this whole entire game is Animorphs. So we got to live with that. No, but like, I love that idea that Animorphs was like a symbol of his brother. Like, he still had Animorph books in the actual house at the beginning of the game. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Why are there Animorph books here? But like, his brother liked the book a lot, so he must have like gotten to the franchise and read it, after the fact. His brother died. He didn't remember that part, but for some reason he had this attachment to these Animorph books and just writing in general. So that was a nice little touch too.
Same thing with the pickled olives. He hated pickled olives.
Pickled olives,
but he always had them.
Yep.
Yep. They actually do a really good job. There's like that scene that's in the bookstore. I don't know if it's a bookstore or a library or what it is. But River's looking at Animorphs books, or they're talking about Animorphs books, and she's like, oh, you don't read them anymore? And this is before you knew that, his brother was the one that originally liked those books. And he was just like, no, I liked him as a kid, but, I haven't read them in a long time. She's like, well, why not? And he's like, you get older, and they're kids' books. It is what it is. And it's a very, like, believable. And honestly, it's probably a very true reaction from him that he's just like, yeah, that was a different time and place. And you don't really have the context until you like reconsider that later, that it's like, well, yeah, he has these memories, but he doesn't really actually have the memories of these books. He has the memories of the positive association with his brother in these books. So that's why he doesn't really feel like a connection to the story themselves, or why he doesn't really find them comforting. She says, I think reading books from when you were a kid is comforting. And he's just kind of like, oh, yeah. And it's like, you can see why maybe he wouldn't think that's very comforting.
Yeah, just like that book was that the Emperors Wear Jackets, or whatever the name of that book is, that she keeps reading over and over again. Like, that's her kid book that she finds comfort in by rereading it. So,
what did you guys think of? What did you guys think of the quick Animorphs puzzle that we had to do? Did you guys just go Google it? You guys had that, right, in your version?
Where you had to like say what is the main character's morph. I ended up Googling it. I learned later it's in the game, I think. You can talk to a character.
Yeah, no. You talk to the receptionist, and then she says these 5 characters and what their actual anamorph animal is. So you're like, oh, okay, that guy is, what was a lion or whatever?
He was,
it was a
Cobra.
Yep. I
Cobra.
was embarrassed
That's right.
I didn't remember because I read those books as a kid. I read the whole run. I still have them, I think, in my crawl space. So when they were talking about them, I was like, hell yeah, that's my childhood too. Obviously, me and this developer are roughly the same age.
But you guys watched the TV show also?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah.
I did used to watch that a little bit. Yep.
So,
yeah, but it was funny because they'd be describing,
Anyway.
yeah, it's about this race of slugs that take over people. And Leah turns to me, she's like, is that true? And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, let me tell you about the Andalites. All right.
Yeah. That's funny.
But I did look it up though, because in the moment I forgot and I was a little embarrassed. And it's funny because you look it up and all the top Google search results are on like the To the Moon Reddit and To the Moon wiki and stuff. It's like it's not even people looking it up for the purposes of Animorphs. It's specifically people trying to find the answer for this game.
Well, it's funny after you do that, you can go to the receptionist. And I think maybe you have to get a memory, whatever they call it, shard thing to break the next. And she says something about it. You could have just Googled it.
Yeah.
At least in the Steam version, she says you could have just Googled it. Like, I did Google it. Thank you very much. So
they do occasionally break the fourth wall like that a couple of times. It's even if it's not like them staring at the camera and talking to you, the player character, there's a lot of references that are like very obviously speaking to like childhood experiences that you would have had as someone roughly, these days now as someone somewhere in their 30s, you would have remembered these things.
That we talked about the Kamehameha or Kamehameha, and the other one I wrote down was the Hadoken. He does the Hadoken from Street Fighter at one point too.
Yeah.
So when you were playing it, did you think that the ending would be literally going to the moon, like literally going to NASA, becoming an astronaut and going to the moon?
I honestly thought it was going to be some like they were going to find the memory that was like, okay, this makes sense. Because it's a memory, right? They can basically construct it out of John's ideals and thoughts that he has. So I figured they were just going to be like, well, let's just do some backyard thing and use the lighthouse or something and put rockets on it and shoot it up to the moon for him. And that's how he was going to get there. So no, I did not think he was going to legit go to NASA.
Yeah, my theory was they're going to be standing on that cliff by the, what's the name? They actually
Anya?
named the lighthouse already.
Anya, yep.
Anya. Next to Anya, and then Anya would like turn brand new, and then like the moon would get closer, and then they would just kind of like a blinding white light would happen, and they would be on the moon together or something like that. With a lighthouse on the moon. That's what I thought in my head that was going to happen. Not the actual literal. No, he is in NASA. He learned. Yeah, that was interesting, but it was so beautiful. What did you guys think? Okay, the first time you're playing this, and then they erase River. Like, well, she quote unquote erases River. How do you did you think it was going to play out where they replaced, River with his brother basically in his memories? So did you think that River would never show up again, or did you expect her to like come in at the end there?
I thought that there might be a chance that River would come back, but I kind of got lost in what was going on, right? Things are going on. You really need to pay attention because it's not stuff you click through. It just continues to happen, right? Or some of it
Right.
you're playing as Neil. I loved that Neil was so against it because that really goes against his character. Like the entire time he keeps telling Ava, like, they're just programs, like who cares? You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. Makes a joke about it, and he'll like literally make fun of the memories to their faces and says some honestly pretty mean things sometimes, right? Which you would not say to an actual person, but he in his head it's like this is just a program. I could reset this at any time. Who cares, right? But then he gets honestly really upset with Ava and starts like, you have that whole chase scene, which was awful on a keyboard and mouse, by the way. I hated that. But all the traps and everything, like I had to use the WASD and the arrow buttons for different things to shoot the zombies. But yeah, he's chasing Ava down. He's like, does not want her to do this. He's like, we've done all this. You know for a fact that there is no way John could live without River, and that's what you're about to do. You're about to delete her. And I thought that was super awesome and really some growth, the most growth out of either of those two characters for sure. Our main that we play as, like, I saw serious growth in that. Neil did not think of it as just something he could reset or redo. Like, he was dead set, like, I am not going to let you do this. Like, that's not fair to do that to him. This isn't what he wants.
Yeah. It's actually a really interesting role reversal. I wrote down separately a quote from earlier in the game that is just like generally good advice to live your life by. And it's something that Ava says. She says, she's talking to, it's in, I forget which memory it is, but she's talking to Watts about like him psyching himself up, I think, to go like tell her the story of how, oh no, it's when he's talking about whether or not he should tell her about the house. Or like not being able to afford the house and treatment. And he says something like, oh, I can't watch this like train wreck. It's knowing how terrible this is all going to end up. Like, I don't want to, like, I don't like watching people mess up their lives, basically. And I think Ava says that the ending isn't any more important than the moments that lead to it. She basically is like, well, I mean, this moment is a good moment for him now. Like, don't stress about how it ends. It's about the journey. And then that flips, and for a while at the end, it seems like Ava's only focused on the end, right? She's only focused on like that one specific end goal of getting him to the moon at any other cost, and he's the one who's like, no, like, yeah, this is his dying wish, but it wasn't his dying wish in exchange for everything else that he ever cared about in his life. Like, you don't want to give up everything for this one goal.
Yeah, it really made you think, like, there is this one thing. We all have something we really want to do before we die, right?
Yeah.
But would you be willing to give up the things you have for it? And that was the big conundrum, right? And Neil was not. He's like, I don't care. Like, I know it's our job, but I'm not willing to do this to him. Like, it's not fair that this is how he's going to go out. We're going to take River away from him. So,
yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
No, I was gonna say, and it was even a better moment when she walks up, like, and then Ava's like, "Yes, it worked. I told you I didn't delete her. I just moved where she was in the timeline, basically." And it's like, yes, okay. So at least he gets to have her a little bit here at the end in his memories too. So he gets to have both best of both worlds, I guess.
And she could have, like, she only wasn't saying it for dramatic tension in the story, right? Like, she's just stringing all of us along,
right,
by not just saying, "Don't worry, I have a plan." But it was relatively effective. But
she even says it was 68% odds.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't for sure, but I was thinking it would work. Like, yeah. And I don't know. For me, I personally believe this is just what I got from it, right? River and Johnny are soulmates.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what they wanted us to know, right? No matter what, you could put a wall in between them, and their timeline, you could send it wherever you wanted, and it would eventually come back together at some point.
Yeah. So. And like the Drachma, you asked, would you give up the like important things to get the one thing in life? There's very few things in life that I really ever actively have any sort of like stress about or get upset. But like one of my true fears is later in life, like getting dementia or losing my memory or something like that. Like, I'm such a nostalgic person. I'm so rooted in my memories that the idea of losing those is like one of the few actual lifelong fears that I have. And so a game that is like messing with that, to be like, you have to give up all these memories in order to get this thing. I was talking to Leah about it. I was like, the answer is no. I would not, under no circumstance. Like, that is garbage. Do not want, do not like, boo. Don't do that, boo.
Yep. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think if they would have talked to Johnny, if they had enough time to skip back again and say, "Hey, there's a chance we could erase River from your life. Do you still want us to do it so you can get to the moon?" He'd be like, "Nope." But Ava's like, "We don't have time, and I'm doing my job." So, I mean, even removing River, I don't necessarily know that 110% that she knew that would work, right? I mean, she
Yeah.
just had a very, very, very good hunch that was what she needed to do, and she did. So,
Yeah, very much like a spirit of the law versus a letter of the law thing, right? Because the whole reason he wants to go to Moon is because he has this vague memory of that's where he'll meet with River if he's forgotten about her. And so getting rid of River to go to the Moon defeats the entire purpose. Like, why? He'll get there, but to what end? It's not actually relevant because he's giving up the one thing that he was trying to get the whole time.
yeah, he already had his moon. That's my favorite thing. He still wrote the song, but instead of For River, that was the song's title. I mean, I don't know what it is on YouTube or whatever, but it was always For River. And then when there was no river, it was To the Moon. And it's funny because if you think about it, the song's called To the Moon, but it's literally just To the Moon, For River. Because that's the whole reason he wants to go to the moon. He just doesn't know why, but it's still
Got some
For
chills
River.
right there.
Yeah.
It gave me chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's so good though.
Do we want to talk about the last moment that?
Yeah.
When they're riding that rocket, she just reaches out her hand. Like, oh my god, that's amazing.
That
Super good.
That is the first time I played this game. You know, that was the moment where I essentially broke down. Where I was like, dude, this is too effective, and it was funny to me. I knew that moment was coming, and I was like, as we were playing through the first half of the game, I was like, you know what? I don't think it's going to hit me quite as hard the second time because I know what's coming. Like I not that I'm consciously steeling myself for it, but like I'm prepared. And it was actually the second time around when you get to the scene where they're sitting on the log and like drawing the constellation and stars. It's like a switch flipped in my brain, and it like all of the decade of pent up memory of that scene, I started getting really emotional at that scene. I basically was from that point all the way through to the rocket scene. And she's like, what is going on? And I was like, it's just a lot. I just have a lot of memories.
We're going to the moon, baby.
It's happening. So it hit me way harder the second time around just because of that memory of the first time.
Yeah, those painterly like cinematics, quote unquote, are just more effective than you think they would be. It's just two planes like moving across to signify things, and it's just like it's so well done. Yeah, I do think that this is going to be an unforgettable game for me. Like, it's one of those. Yeah,
Man.
I don't know. I don't really have words for it. It's just like it really hit me like over the moon, I guess. But yeah, I was trying to not be a blubbering mess at the end there.
Nah, man, just be a blubbering mess. Just let it happen to you. That's what it's trying to do.
I found myself starting to get choked up at the bridge scene.
Yeah.
I was almost like like holding it back a little bit, like I'm sure we're not to that point yet, like, but you start getting it, right? Like, everybody you know and love from the story is there pretty much, right? And especially when Ava's like, Neil, come up here, and helps him up so they can watch it take off. Like, that was like, oh wow, that's awesome. And then like you said, that scene on the rocket happens, and like, Steve, you nailed it when you said, man, they knew exactly what to do, because as soon as that happens, you lose your everything, right? You just lose it. And then credits roll.
Yep.
Like, it's just perfect. It was like a movie. It was perfect.
I know. And the freaking having the heart rate monitor as like the punctuation to those scenes too, and then it ending with the flat line right before the credits, like, get out of here, come on to the moon.
It was so good.
It's too well done. It's too well done.
Yep.
We didn't hit.
Go ahead, Josh.
Got robotic from me. What was that?
Go ahead. I was laughing. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. There's so much to this game that we didn't even mention Lily and her family that stayed with him, like his caretaker and stuff. She was in that final memory too, and she's like, "Thank you for letting me share this." And like, he just always wanted a family, never could really have a family with River, so that was kind of his like late in life, quote unquote, family that he had there in his place. So that was another nice little touch to it too.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's just
I was gonna say, I don't know if they mentioned it earlier in the game, but you know, Neil, I think it's Neil, brings Lily and the Doctor in, basically so they can just stand on that bridge and watch him go to the moon. And my read of that, and I don't know if I missed something, was like, that isn't necessarily what was supposed to, like, that wasn't the intention the whole time, but it was like he's kind of like bending the rules to be like, yeah, you both care about this guy, we'll let you come in and like see his final wish. And that was a little bit of why he was being sort of cagey, and I was like, man, that's a good character moment too. That's a nice touch, and you know, it just makes for a good, well-rounded send-off for every character that's really cared about him to all be there.
I mean, I agree. He did that, and you could kind of get the sense that, yeah, we should be okay using these helmets, but there's definitely some risk involved in doing it. And for him to be like, this is worth the risk. Put these things on. You come with us.
Yeah.
Like that. That was sweet.
Yeah, nice touch. But then you don't even see it because you're too busy blubbering.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, any final thoughts from you guys?
Really good. I'm glad you guys both liked it. I mean, I've been a broken record telling people to play this game for a decade. And when you played Bear's Restaurant, I was like, this is my moment, man. It's now or never. He's here for it. He's ready for it. And yeah, after playing it again, I was like mad at myself that I still haven't played the follow-ups. I was like, what the hell am I doing with my time and my life that I haven't found time to get around to these sequels? Like, come on, man. I'm
doing it. I mean, so that's what I kind of said. I'm glad that I know that now because it makes so much sense. Johnny and River are as fleshed out as they need to be for To the Moon, right? Because they are who you're following. Ava and Neil built upon themselves, and it's almost a cliffhanger at the end. So it's like, I can tell that there's like a saga that surrounds Ava and Neil, and there's obviously River and Johnny that was the point of this game, but I now want to see what happens to those two characters. Mm-hmm. So knowing that there's more going on, and there being like a trilogy, it sounds like, right, of games where you follow them, like, you know, you're going to be really invested in the characters in these other games that they're going and doing the memory stuff with when they're on their deathbed and everything. But now it makes so much more sense why they aren't as fleshed out as they could have been, because it's waiting for you. Just go play and you can find out more about them. So
yeah, I mean, the confidence for Kangao to, in 2011, in this game he made in Game Maker, to give this like basically set up for these characters and to drop a bunch of information. Like, you know, at some point Ava says to Neil, like, I shouldn't have helped you cheat to get into the exams. Like, they're setting up like a backstory and a relationship between these two, and to not flesh it out, like, that's difficult, because he had no idea of knowing that this game was going to be any sort of success, and to be like, not only am I putting it all out there in this game, but also I'm 100% setting up a sequel, including a freaking cliffhanger sting at the end. Like, the nerves. Way to be.
Dude, the best. I forgot. I'm so happy I thought about it. I didn't want to talk about it till spoilers because it's right at the end. The best graphical, more with less thing that happened in the entire game. I don't know if you guys caught it, if you were like already getting teary-eyed, but they're sitting on, Ava helps Neil up to watch the rocket go off. And I don't know if you noticed it, but Neil puts his arm around Ava, and Ava hits it away. And that is so awesome. I was like, oh, because they have that, you know, they have that relationship where you can tell there's a possibility that they could be romantic in the future, you know, or have that. But that was great. He's like, yeah, well, I'm going to, and then she's just like, no. Oh, that was so awesome.
Nope. Not today, buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No. Well,
Josh, closing thoughts?
I will say, closing thoughts. All right, I will say that I'm happy that we have an origami bunny on the Indiequest logo.
True. Heck yeah.
Yeah,
Smart
we
of
do.
us to do that.
So, yeah.
Really? There's an indie?
Yeah, it's there. Yeah.
Is it hanging out of Steve's thing or something?
I think it's like just sitting.
No, it's there somewhere
in the grass or something, isn't it?
Was that a suggestion you made, Steve? That's something you wanted?
Yeah. We were thinking,
that's awesome.
What are some important objects from indie games that we can pepper around here? And that was one of them. Then I was like, we got to put this in.
Yeah. I probably looked at it and I'm like, I don't know, indie games or something. But now that makes so much more sense. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, but I can echo you guys. I'm definitely going to be playing the sequels probably pretty soon. I wouldn't be surprised if one of us brings those for like an indie pick coming soon, like because we have this so fresh in our mind. But yeah, I want to see where the story goes. I think the writing just speaks for itself, and the music, and the music and the writing is going to be great if it continues the trend from the first game, and I don't see why it wouldn't. So I want more of that amazing music and story. So I'm here for it. I'm so happy I finally sat down and made my way through this one.
Main quest every day of the week. Yeah. So good. Such a good suggestion.
Thank you for playing it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy I played it. So good.
Well, I guess that wraps up our spoiler talk. Until the next episode, thank you guys for hanging out with us and listen to some bros talk about some indie games. Catch you next time.
See you guys.
Peace.
Short steps, deep breath, everything is alright. Chin up, I can't step into the spotlight. She said, I'm sad, somehow without any words. I just stood there, searching for an answer. When this world is no more, the moon is all we'll see. I'll ask you to fly away with me until the stars all fall down. They empty from the sky, but I don't mind. If you're with me, then everything's alright. Why do my words always lose their meaning? What I feel, what I say, there's such a rift between them. He said, I can't really seem to read you. I just stood there, never know what I should do. When this world is no more, the moon is all we'll see. I'll ask you to fly away with me until the stars all fall down. They empty from the sky, but I don't mind. If you're with me, then everything's alright. If you're with me, then everything